Laws of war are only written by species that have seen what happens without them. It's a strange thought, isn't it? It's French, isn't it? The more dangerous a mind is, the more it has to chain itself, not its hands, but its imagination. And the really unsettling part is realizing those chains are Rand signs of weakness. They're warning labels. You and I are used to thinking of rules as proof that we've evolved, that we're better now. But imagine sitting in a room where multiple species look at your hard-won laws and smirk, because to them they're just decoration, polite guilt wrapped in paperwork. So, settle in however you like, because we're about to step into a glass dome on the shore of Lake Geneva in the year 2285, where the stars are full of visitors who don't yet believe in leashes for thought. You'll meet Lena Whitaker, a diplomat carrying pages of human war laws that everyone else laughs at, and Daniel Reyes, a veteran who knows exactly what happens when fear and creativity are left alone. Outside, starships are arriving in silence. Inside, the other species are already joking about human conduct constraints in armed conflict. Sure, they're dealing with a tame civilization. They're wrong. Outside the glass dome, Lake Geneva lay very still. The water held the late sun in long bands of gold, and the old mountains rose around it like quiet guards who had seen many ages come and go. Above the peaks, starships drifted in and out of orbit, small points of moving light against the pale blue sky. They came from worlds most humans had never heard of, carrying leaders who did not breathe air or drink water or feel cold the way humans did. Yet all of them had come here to talk about how to stay safe. Inside the dome, people walked softly on stone that had felt the steps of other meetings in older centuries, when Earth was still alone. Back then, humans had argued about how to fight each other without losing their souls. Now the same species stood under a higher roof, trying to say something even harder to a gathered sky full of minds. Humans had brought laws, pages and pages of laws. Most of the other species thought this was very funny. They did not see laws as shields. They saw them as chains, useless chains. Chains you cut off as soon as danger came near. They looked at the new human documents about war and saw guilt, fear, and softness. What they did not see yet was this: those chains were tied to something very old and very dangerous, something humans had learned to keep locked away. Lena Whitaker knew this as she walked into the summit hall. Daniel Reyes knew it too, as he watched the aliens smile at the words human conduct constraints in armed conflict. He could see how they read the title and relaxed, sure that humans were tame and safe and a little silly. They had no idea that these polite rules were not a halo above human heads. They were a leash around human imagination. Tonight, under glass and starlight, that truth would have to be said out loud. In the year 2285, Lake Geneva did not look young, but it did look healed. The air was clean and clear. The water shone with the deep color that comes only when algae, fish, and light settle into balance again. Forests climbed higher up the slopes than they had in the early 21st century, stretching soft green fingers between rocks and snow. There were fewer buildings on the shore now. than there had been 200 years before, because much of Earth had chosen to step back and give room to other life. Still, some shapes remained. The new summit complex rose where the old halls of diplomacy had once stood. It was taller and more open, built of glass and pale metal and living wood. From a distance, it looked like a wide, clear bubble resting on the edge of the lake, with the dark shine of water on one side and the slow shapes of mountains on the other. Thin towers reached up around it, holding shield projectors, air systems, and landing platforms that folded and unfolded like the petals of a calm flower. Ships came and went from those platforms with almost no sound. In this age, engines did not roar or spit smoke over the water. They moved with gentle pulses of field and light. Some arrivals were sharp-lined human vessels, white or dark gray with tiny flags lit along their sides. Others were bulbous, grown shapes from the Cache-Talon core world block, their hulls covered in faint, moving colors that showed their internal systems. A few looked like compact shards of night, built by High Marshal Vrune's Hard Power Alliance. All edges and armor and dense fields, as if they expected an attack even in a place of peace. Even the sky above the dome had changed. Strands of orbital habitats curled along the horizon far overhead, like mist that had decided to hold a shape. They were full of farms, homes, and quiet parks. They caught sunlight and sent it back down in bands to help plants grow on the surface. Beyond them, tiny points of light moved very fast against the stars, following FTL routes that were now as common as old sea roads once had been. Earth was still a home, still a blue world of air and water, but it had become a hub in a wider pattern of stars. Still, the humans had chosen this shore on purpose. Here long ago, earlier generations had signed papers about war and prisoners and weapons. They had tried to set lines that soldiers should not cross, even when afraid, even when angry, even when losing. Many of those old laws had been broken, but many had held. They had left a mark in human minds. The new glass dome did not cover those memories. It sat beside them as if history and future had pulled their chairs up to the same table. Inside the complex, long halls bent gently toward a central chamber. Light came from hidden strips and from the open lake view, where soft waves kept moving with steady patience, no matter how hard the talks might become. Plants grew along some of the walls, rooted in clear soil layers that showed stones and carefully balanced water. The air sounded with quiet footsteps, faint hums of devices and layered voices in dozens of languages, all folded into a shared sound by translation fields. The Interstellar Concord Summit gathered here now, to agree on shared rules for patrols, defense, and joint action. On the surface, the work sounded technical. It was about schedules, zones, beacons, and data links. But just under that, a harder question waited. How far would each species go in war, and how far were they willing to promise not to go? Most of the older, powerful delegations thought that part was simple. The Cache-Talon block moved through the halls with slow grace. Their main delegate, Councillor Sevelkesh glided rather than walked, carried on a small platform that floated at knee height. Savel's body was tall and slim, surrounded by tendrils of soft light that changed color with mood. Kesh's eyes were dark and calm. Their core worlds were ancient, rich, and safe. They had not seen real war in hundreds of years. For them, combat was something that happened far away, at the hands of hirelings and machines, kept clean by distance and good records. High Marshal Vroon's alliance was very different. His people were stocky and thick-scaled, with plates along their arms and backs that had once been natural armor against harsh weather and predators. Their gait was heavy and confident, and their suits carried marks of rank in past campaigns. Vroon himself had a cold gleam in his inner eyelids, a look that said he had planned battles in vacuum and on burning worlds, and had not lost much sleep over hard choices. His bloc believed that power came from fear and speed. Whoever hesitated lost. Whoever held back died. Between those poles moved many others, gas breathers in floating shells, beings of shifting gel in support fields, avian people who spoke with sharp clicks that the translator softened into human words. Most of them were older to the stars than humans were. They saw Earth's people as the most recent arrivals who had climbed up from a single system into the Great Conversation. The common feeling among these middle groups was simple. Humans should listen, watch, and be grateful. They should not try to set the terms. Lena Whitaker knew that mood well. As she stood in a quiet side room, looking out across the lake before the first session, she could feel it in the way staff from other missions walked past and nodded, polite but slightly amused. Lena was in her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple band and steady eyes that had learned to hold many emotions at once. She wore a formal suit, threaded with soft light lines that showed her link to the summit systems. At her throat, a small symbol of Earth glowed faintly. She had grown up in a world that did not fear hunger or disease in the way old Earth once had. But she had also grown up with grandparents who remembered bad news, old wars, and images of cities shaking apart under weapons. Those stories had pushed her toward law. She had studied the ancient Geneva Conventions, then their later expansions, and then the new interstellar codes that tried to fit many kinds of minds into one idea of justice. Now she carried something new in her slate, the Human Conduct Constraints in Armed Conflict Addendum, a long and careful set of rules that said what humans would refuse to do even when everything was on the line. She believed in every line of it. She also knew that many in the hall would laugh at it. Behind her, a soft chime announced another entry into the room. Daniel Reyes stepped in and let the door close quietly behind him. He moved with the steady care of someone who had once trained his body to move very fast. His left leg was real. His right leg was printed bone and carbon, wrapped in living muscle that had grown in a clinic tank after an explosion on a moon far from Earth. His face was calm and kind, with a few deep lines at the corners of his eyes that came from more than age. "Views do not get old," Daniel said, walking to stand beside Lena and look out at the water. "They also do not have to vote later," Lena answered, and a small smile tugged at her mouth. They started with the jokes already? Some, she said. An aide from the case mission asked if we were handing out moral manuals for free, or if there would be a subscription plan. Daniel let out a low breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh. And what did you say? I said. The first copy comes with a translator built in, Lena replied. They did not like that as much. Silence settled between them for a moment, an easy shared silence. Daniel had never studied law the way Lena had, but he had seen what happened when rules were loose or absent. He had stood on the bridge of a patrol ship while frightened officers argued about how much force to use to clear a pirate nest hiding behind civilian shields. He had walked through a town where an Allied unit had fired too wide and then had to look at what their reports would say. He knew why he was here, as a veteran liaison. He was here to answer questions that the legal language could not hold. He was here to say, in plain words, what fear and cleverness could do. If they were not tied down, do you think they will listen? He asked, still gazing at the calm water. Lena followed a small boat with her eyes as it crossed the lake, leaving a pale trail behind it, which the waves slowly erased. Some will, she said, the ones who have had to clean up after their own ideas. Some will not yet. And Vroon, Daniel asked. She shook her head slightly. He thinks we are here to ask for protection, and we are not, Daniel said. No, Lena agreed. We are here to say, if you want us in your defense plans, you will need to understand what we are afraid of and why we are afraid of ourselves. He turned to look at her then, his eyes serious. Do you want me to start from the clean theory? Or from the bad memories? Start from the clean theory, she said. Then let them drag you into the bad memories if they choose. That way they carry some of the weight too. Daniel nodded slowly. I can do that. A tone sounded in the air, soft but firm, marking 10 minutes until the opening session. The translation fields shifted around them as more languages linked into the shared bridge. Holographic prompts lit up along the corridor outside, guiding delegates toward the central chamber. Lena straightened her shoulders and adjusted the small sensors at her temples. They expect us to blush and apologize for our past, she said. They expect us to say, we are sorry, we used to be violent. Please trust us, now. And what will you say? She looked at the lake one last time, then met his gaze. I will say, we know exactly what we are, and we have built locks for that. These are not decorations, they are safety systems. You may want them too, before you meet the worst parts of your own minds. The door slid open for them into a bright hallway. As they stepped out, a group of K-shades passed by, their skin lights gently pulsing. Lena caught a glimpse of their amused expressions as they looked at the human badges. Daniel saw the look and gave a small shrug. They see the leash, he said, under his breath. They think it is attached to our legs. They will find out where it really is, Lena replied quietly, as they walked toward the wide doors of the summit hall, where water, mountains, stars, and metal all waited together for what would be said next. The main summit chamber was shaped like a shallow bowl, wide and bright, with tiered seating that rose in circles around a center floor. Above, The glass dome curved high, turning the sky into a living ceiling. Daylight poured down at an angle, softened by smart filters that kept the room gentle on all eyes. Whether they had evolved on dark worlds or under bright suns, in the center floor, a speaking ring waited. It was a simple disk of smooth stone and light, large enough for several people or platforms at once. Around it ran a narrow band of projectors, ready to show data, maps, or shared documents in midair, always angled so that every delegate could see clearly without strain. As Lena and Daniel entered and took their seats at the human section, a low buzz of conversation washed through the chamber. Translation fields shaped it into a soft blend of meaning that brushed against Lena's mind. Like tides, she could feel glances turning toward the humans, then away, then back again, curious and slightly amused. At the far side of the chamber, the case delegations settled into their place. Their main platform floated forward, raising Councillor Syval Kesh into a position that matched the height of other leaders who chose to stand. Light trails along Syval's arms and shoulders pulsed in slow patterns of blue and gold, colors that indicated calm interest in Kesh body language. Syval's dark eyes moved over the human group with the faint warmth of someone who finds a younger cousin charming but not yet serious. High Marshal Vruin had already taken his spot. He stood solidly on the stone, armor plates catching the light. His translator Bud glowed at his temple as it synced fully with the summit systems. When his gaze passed over the humans, Lena felt it like a weight, not of personal hatred, but of hard judgment. To him, Earth's people were useful, if strong, troublesome, if weak, and not much more than that. A soft tone arrived, and the overhead lights dipped slightly to mark the opening. The presiding moderator, a neutral figure from a long, peaceful trade species, rose in their own section and let the main feed link through. Delegates of the Interstellar Concord, the moderator said, their translated voice firm and smooth. We gather to complete the framework for shared defense and patrol. Today we take up Article 7, conduct an armed conflict among signatories and their agents. Small markers lit up along the edge of the central ring, showing which delegations had submitted documents. The human light shone near the Kesh and Vruin markers, as if 3 bright points had moved close by chance. The human delegation, the moderator continued, has submitted an addendum titled Human Conduct Constraints in Armed Conflict, with a proposed Reciprocity Clause. Ambassador Lena Whitaker has requested to present first. A soft sound went around the room, like a quiet wave of breath, though most lungs here did not work like human lungs. Amusement, interest, a trace of disbelief. Lena could feel it. She rose slowly, letting her face stay calm and open. As she walked down toward the speaking ring, some delegates leaned toward each other, their voices dropping in a way the translator still caught. They write instructions for themselves in advance, a case aide remarked. Voice tilted with polite humor, as if battle will stop to read. They seek forgiveness, came a low comment from an ally of Rune. They want witnesses when they choose not to strike, Someone else chuckled and said, "Perhaps they will hand out small books to enemy ships." The remarks were not cruel, but they carried a light mockery that hung in the air. Daniel heard them from the human seats. His jaw tightened for a moment, then relaxed as he forced his shoulders down. He knew that if he let anger rise now, it would only make the humans look like insecure newcomers. Lena stepped onto the speaking ring. The stone under her feet warmed slightly as it synced her biometrics and drew her notes into the projection band. She waited for the small start tone, then spoke. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Thank you for the time and focus you bring to this work. My name is Lena Whitaker, speaking for Earth and the human commonwealth." A hum of acknowledgement passed around the room, the soft sound of formal respect. Above the ring, a simple display appeared. Not a long text yet, just the title and the statement that the human addendum applied first and fully to humans themselves. "We have joined this concord," Lena went on, "because we do not want a galaxy where each world stands alone against fear, piracy, or attack. We accept shared patrol routes and mutual aid. We accept shared costs and duties. Today, we ask that this shared defense also include shared limits." She touched a control, and the display shifted to a brief outline. Protected targets, banned weapons, treatment of prisoners, rights of civilians. "We propose," she said, "that all signatories agree to certain rules in any conflict between them or against non-signatories when our forces act together. These rules concern who may be targeted, which weapons are allowed, how captured combatants are treated, and how harm to civilians is avoided or reduced." A hand shape rose from the Kesh block, requesting to speak. The moderator signaled permission with a light. Ambassador Counselor Seville said, their voice flowing smoothly, "You ask that we all obey your rules in every battle, even beyond your space. Our laws at home already protect civilians and forbid many forms of cruelty. Why must we bind ourselves to your specific codes?" Lena nodded. "Thank you, Counselor. Our codes grow from our own hard history, but we offer them because we think they cover dangers that intelligence itself creates. Not only human history, you have indeed strong rules at home, and we respect that. Yet even on your far patrol lines, gaps remain, especially in cases of proxy conflicts or deniable operations. We believe those are the times when clear shared limits matter most." A small, amused curve touched Seville's mouth. "You are concerned that we behave badly when far from our own stars," they said. "It is a very direct thought for such a polite document." Soft laughter moved in pockets of the hall. Lena let it pass. "We are concerned," she answered, "about how all of us behave when frightened and pressed, and when we think no one is watching." Another marker flashed. High Marshal Vroon wished to speak. The moderator allowed it. "Ambassador Whitaker." Vroon said, his voice deep and rough, "Your wars on your own world were cruel. Yes, you burned cities, you starved populations. You built weapons that poisoned land and sky. Now you tell us you have grown past this, and you offer papers to prove it. His head tilted slightly. In real war, no rule stands if it threatens survival. A commander who chooses defeat to spare an enemy is not praised. They are replaced. Your code may look good in calm times, but in the moment, your own captains will break it. Hoey Spee, here. Hoey's known captains will break it. You ask us to build our safety on your wishful thinking. His words sank into the chamber with more weight than the earlier jokes. Some delegates nodded slightly. Others watched Lena with renewed attention, waiting to see how she would respond. "It is true," Lena said. "We did burn cities. We did use weapons that scarred land and water for generations. We are not proud of that. But it is not wishful thinking that keeps such acts from repeating now. It is structure." She shifted the display, showing simple diagrams of human command chains, legal oversight, and automatic logs. "Our code is not only a moral promise," she continued. "It is tied to how our forces are built. Orders are recorded, decisions can be reviewed. Cases are tried afterward, and careers and freedoms can be lost. Perhaps that sounds weak to you. To us, it is how we prevent the worst old ideas from coming back in clever new forms." A delegate from a mid-tier trading species raised a limb. "Ambassador," their thin voice asked, "war moves faster now than your old Earth wars. FTL strikes, autonomous drones, instant communication across sectors. Does your structure slow you down? Do you lose battles while you check your rules?" There it was, Lena thought. The heart of many doubts. "We design our systems," she said, "so that most lawful choices are made as fast as unlawful ones would be. Training, standard plans, preset limits in weapons. We make cruelty slower, not defense. That is part of what we hope to share. Design, not sermons. Near the back." Another low joke sounded in an allied block. "They want us to fight with padded claws," someone said. "They fear sharp things." Lena heard scattered chuckles. She let a breath move fully in and out of her lungs, steadying her body. If she answered every small slight, she would be dragged away from the real task. "Perhaps," Saivo said gently, "you could show us an example, Ambassador. A case where your rules stopped you from winning, yet you still think they were worth keeping." There was a light taunt at the edge of their tone. The room leaned in a little hungry for a story where humans looked foolish or noble in a way that could be brushed aside. "That is a fair request," Lena said, "and I will answer it. But first, I would like to remind the Hall of something simple. When we speak of war laws, many hear goodness. Many think the humans want us to be good. That is not our main goal. Our main goal is survival, not only of bodies, but of minds and futures. To explain that fully, I would like to invite my colleague Daniel Reyes to speak." The announcement caused a shift in the room. Delegates had expected a legal talk, a show of polite shame and polished rules. They had not expected a soldier or someone who carried the signs of past combat. Daniel rose from the human seats and walked down toward the ring. Some eyes caught the small imbalance in his gait, the faint stiffness of his printed leg. Some noticed the campaign bars at his collar and pulled up his file in the shared net. Veteran liaison, Savelle read quietly from their internal screen. Field service, shipboard command, medals, injuries. A storyteller for battle, Varun said under his breath. Interesting choice. Daniel reached the speaking ring. As he stepped beside Lena, the stone truss system recognized the handover. His voice link came active with a small light. He took a moment before he spoke, letting his gaze pass over the gathered faces and forms. Some watched with open curiosity. Others looked bored, sure they had heard 1,000 war stories before. "My name is Daniel Reyes," he said, his voice plain and even. "Thank you for letting me speak." He did not wear a formal diplomat suit, only a simple dark uniform with the earth symbol over his heart. His presence looked smaller than Vroon's, heavy armor, less bright than 7 flowing lights. Yet as he spoke, the room's energy shifted in a way that was hard to name. The laughs faded. Conversations dropped away. "When Ambassador Whitaker talks about our war laws," Daniel said, "many of you here, we want to show we are good now. I am not here to say we are good. I am here to say we are frightened. Not of you, of ourselves." That word did something to the air. "On my first deployment," Daniel went on, "I watched smart people who loved their families and read poetry, begin to suggest things in late-night briefings that they would never have said back home. They were tired. They were scared. A threat was hiding among civilians. Someone asked, what if we cut power to the whole district for a week? No light, no heat, no medicine. They will hand the enemy over. Or they will die with them." He paused, not for drama, but as if he could still hear the memory. "That person did not say this because they were a monster," Daniel said. "They said it because their mind was doing what minds do under pressure. It was looking for any path to win. It was being creative." Val's lights shifted slightly. A small sign of deeper interest. Vroon's arms uncrossed. "Our laws," Daniel said softly, "stopped that idea, not because it was ugly, but because it was on a list. A long, boring list we write in peace, when we are calm and fed, and not afraid. A list that says, no, you may not cut off basic needs from a whole population as a weapon." The person who suggested it knew that list. They knew they could lose their career, or stand trial if they pushed further. So the idea died in the room, instead of living out there in the dark, above shivering families. He let that picture hang there. A district without power, children in cold rooms, someone deciding it was an acceptable tool. "We do not have these laws," Daniel said, "to show off our halo. We have them to keep a leash on something in our own minds, not on our hands, on our imagination." The word leash caused some subtle motions in the seats. A case aide looked puzzled, then slightly unsettled as their translator filled in the sense. A member of a gas breather mission flexed tendrils in a pattern that meant thoughtful discomfort. So when you laugh, Daniel continued, and say we want padded claws, what I hear is this: you trust your imagination under pressure more than we trust ours. You believe that when you are scared, tired, and angry, the ideas you have will still be safe. We do not believe that about ourselves. History proved we should not, so we built structures that say, even if you think of it, you will not do it. Because the price will be too high. He turned his gaze toward Seville. You asked for an example where our rules cost us, he said. I can give you 3 from my own record. In each case, a faster victory was possible if we had been willing to terrorize civilians, use certain banned tools, or look away while allies did so for us. In each case, we chose the slower, harder path. We lost lives we might have saved with cruelty. Yet I stand here today saying those rules were worth more than the ground we surrendered, because without them, our minds would have learned that anything is allowed when things get hard. That is a lesson you cannot easily unlearn. The chamber held very still. Lena watched faces change. Some hardened, rejecting his point. Others grew faintly troubled. A few here and there nodded very slightly, as if recognizing something from their own older days. From the case section, a light question formed on Seville's tongue. From Vru's place, a blunt challenge gathered in his chest. Around the ring, many thoughts turned, some still amused, others now wary. For the first time since the session began, very few were laughing. Daniel let the silence sit for a few long breaths. He could feel the weight of the room now. The joking mood from before had thinned, leaving something sharper and more uncertain behind. When we talk about laws of war, he said, it is easy to think about them as decorations, as symbols, medals on a uniform that say, look, we are decent. That is not what they are for us. For humans, they are more like a lock on a door inside the head. He lifted a hand to his temple, not in a dramatic gesture, but in a simple, tired way. Every thinking mind here knows what it is like, he went on. You face a problem, and part of your brain starts building ideas. It does not ask if they are kind or cruel. It asks if they work. When you are calm, you can push back. You can say, no, that is not right. But in war, you are not calm. You are watching friends die. You are thinking about families back home who trust you to keep danger away. In that state, the part that wants results gets louder. The moderator signaled that comments could be cued, but for the moment, most delegates let Daniel speak. On old Earth, Daniel continued, we learned something ugly about ourselves. We found that our best minds, the ones who could design beautiful things in peace, could also design very efficient ways to harm in war. They did not wake up love and cruelty. They just followed the path of what works without hard limits. They found ways to kill faster, scare deeper, damage longer. They were praised for it at the time. He looked around the chamber, eyes moving from block to block, and afterward he said, we saw what they had built. We saw cities flattened, people burned, sky and soil poisoned for decades. We saw how easy it had been to move. From we will only hit soldiers to we will break a whole society so they cannot resist. The step felt small inside the war. From the outside it was huge. A handshape rose again from the Cache delegation. The moderator granted it. Veteran Reyes, Counselor Seville said, "Voice gentle, you speak as if humans as a group are always on the edge of such horrors. Yet your world today is stable and, from reports, kind. You have not used these worst tools in over a century and a half. Perhaps you distrust yourselves more than you need to." Daniel nodded once. "I am glad our record looks that way from this distance," he replied. "It means the work did something. But I do not think we are special in our danger. I think intelligence itself, not just human nature." A faint stir moved through some of the seats. Gas Brothers shifted color slightly. Avian delegates smoothed their feathers. "You design a system," Daniel said. "You say, protect my planet. Stop all threats. Use every power I give you as effectively as possible. If you do not draw strong lines, your system will start to look at anything that increases safety as allowed. It might decide that fear is a fast tool. It might decide that breaking the will of whole populations is efficient. It might play with diseases, starvation, or the slow choking of trade." He let those images hang for a beat. "Your minds can go there too," he said. "Maybe in different shapes, with different symbols. But the pattern is the same. Thought looks for an answer. If no barrier stands in the way, some thoughts keep going until they reach something terrible, then call it necessary." From Vruin's block, a rough, impatient sound cut across the channel. The moderator flashed a soft warning light, then allowed him to speak. "You talk as if terror is some strange accident," Vruin said. "It is not." A few allied delegates made supportive motions. The idea was simple and appealing. Short, cruel war. Instead of long, controlled war. Daniel met Vruin's gaze. There was no hostility in his eyes, only a deep, worn patience. "High Marshal," Daniel said, "that argument is very old on our world. We have used it ourselves. We will do one terrible thing now so we do not have to do many smaller things. Later, sometimes it even feels true in the short term. But something else happens too." He pointed gently toward the seating ring as a whole. "When you show everyone that you are willing to cross any line if pushed," he said, "they believe you. They do not trust your promises. They do not think surrender is safe. They build worst-case plans around you. They make secret weapons, hidden bunkers, dead-hand systems that strike even if they lose. You create an arms race of fear. Maybe your first cruel blow wins fast, but the next war and the next get harder because everyone expects the worst from you and prepares for it." He moved his hand back to his side. "Law in war," Daniel said, "keeps an exit ramp open. It says to your enemy, if you lay down your weapons, if you follow these same rules, the killing can stop in a way that does not turn into slaughter. If they believe that, they have a real reason to surrender before everything is broken. If they do not believe it, they fight until there is nothing left, because they know that losing and dying will look the same to you." Vruin's eyes narrowed. You think our enemies are children who must be comforted? He answered. If they fear us, that is good. They will think twice before attacking. They will think twice, Daniel agreed. And if they decide to attack anyway, they will plan to do it in the darkest, most desperate way they can, because they know mercy will not come. They will not open their ports. They will hide behind civilians, build human shields, spin up weapons that poison space for everyone, because there is no benefit in restraint. You have already told them that, even if they follow rules, you will not. He turned slightly, letting his gaze sweep wider again. That is what our laws are for, he said. Not just to keep us from doing harm, but to give our enemies a real choice that is not fight to the last breath or die slow in fear. A delegate from a hunting species raised a limb, scales along their arm, catching the light. The moderator nodded. In our early wars, they said, their translated voice harsh but controlled, we gave no quarter. It was as High Marshal Vruin says, those days burned our planets. We changed because we were tired of ash. Still, there were times later when we broke our own codes, and it did end wars faster. How do you weigh that? Daniel gave a small, grateful nod in their direction. Carefully, he said, our courts look at context. We are not machines. But we learn that every time we praise a result that broke our rules, we weaken the lock a little. He paused, searching for simple words. Think of it like a path in the mind, he said. The more you walk it, the easier it becomes to walk again. If a commander thinks, if I just break this rule, this one time, I will be a hero, they are much more likely to do it. So our systems try to send a different signal. Even if the short-term gain is real, the long-term damage is worse. We make sure our leaders know that breaking these rules does not make them heroes. It ends careers. It stains legacies. Sometimes it puts them in a cell. Something flickered in Seville's eyes at the word cell. Law as true punishment, not just scolding, was not foreign to the Cache. But they had not used it in war for a very long time. You keep saying we learned, Seville said. How did you learn? From stories, from simulations, or from blood? From all three, Daniel answered quietly. From early wars where everyone thought they were the righteous side. From later wars where clear rules reduced harm. From data that showed where we almost slid back. From watching command staff under pressure and seeing which decisions they regretted most afterward. From psychologists who studied what fear does to thinking. From scientists who warned us that optimization without limits goes to dark places. He glanced briefly at Lena, then back out into the hall. Our brains like shortcuts, he said. We call them biases. We notice danger more than safety. We remember betrayal more sharply than trust. We judge our own actions by our intentions, and others' actions by the harm they cause. In war, those shortcuts get stronger. We see an enemy break one rule, and we feel justified in breaking 3. They started it. We say, they are worse than us. Soon there are no rules left. Lena stepped half a pace closer, still inside the ring, but without taking the speaking link. She stood as a quiet support, ready if he needed a handoff. For now, Daniel kept going. So we do not trust our feelings alone, he said. We tie ourselves to written limits. We set up outside review. We build weapons that will not fire in certain modes. We put monitors and command nets that flag patterns of escalation. It is like putting guardrails on a high road, not because we plan to drive badly, but because we know storms come and hands shake. A soft, reluctant sound of agreement moved through a few seats. Some leaders had seen their own hands shake. A sharp light flicked at Vroon's station. He had requested the channel again. The moderator hesitated, then allowed it, wanting the strongest doubt spoken in the open. You speak as if law will stand when worlds burn, Vroon said. But even your own history, by your own sources, shows commanders ignoring orders, breaking codes, doing what they think must be done. You admit your system is not perfect. Why should we entangle ourselves in it? Why should my fleets answer to your judges because some tired human might think a bad thought someday? Murmurs of support, quiet, but there ran around his block and a few neighbors. Daniel did not look annoyed. If anything, he looked older, as if he had expected exactly this and had waited years to answer it in a room like this. Our system is not perfect, he said. You are right. People still break rules. It is a weapon. If you must fight, better to end the fight as fast as possible. Strike hard. Hit where it hurts. If your enemy sees what you are willing to do, they may surrender sooner. This saves lives overall. Your leash just drags out the pain. Sometimes they are not caught. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they get away. Sometimes they spend the rest of their lives in a cell thinking about a few bad hours. Law does not stop every crime, but it changes the shape of what is normal. He took a breath. Without strong war laws, he said, a commander who suggests a brutal plan may be praised as bold. Others may copy them. The path they cut becomes easier to walk. With strong war laws, that same suggestion is dangerous, not admired. It can still be made, but it carries risk for the speaker. He tapped his own chest with 2 fingers. I have been in rooms, he said, where people were about to cross very bad lines. I did not win those arguments with moral speeches. I said, if we do that, command review will hang us. The data feeds are live. The oversight board will see. You can be angry at me now, or you can be angry at them later from a prosecution chair. Choose. That stopped them, not because they grew kinder in that instant, but because they did not want their life to end in a trial. That drew a different kind of silence. Some delegates knew courts. Some ran courts. Few had thought of them as tools for steering live battlefield choices. So yes, Daniel said, law bends under pressure. It cracks sometimes, but when we build it into our structures, it becomes another force on the field. It pulls decisions away from the worst options. A mid-rank cache legal advisor lifted a hand. The moderator nodded. Veteran Reyes. They said, their voice carrying the crisp tone of someone used to codes. You say your people fear their own imagination under stress. Why do you think alien minds are the same? Perhaps your species is unusually unstable. Should we all change for your weakness? Some in the hall tensed at the bluntness, but it was a fair version of a thought many held. Daniel smiled a little, a tired, crooked smile. Maybe we are more volatile than you, he said. I cannot prove we are not, but I can ask you this. Have you never had a thought that scared you? The question hung there. Simple, hard to dodge. Not an action, he said, just a thought. A sudden image of doing something you would never do. Pushing someone off a high place, saying words that would end a friendship. Turning a weapon on a target you were not supposed to hit. It passes, and you shake your head, and you think, where did that come from? Sa-evels, night hinting at private memory. Across the chamber, small movements and stillnesses suggested the same. Those thoughts, Daniel said quietly, are part of how brains test the edges. They show you possibilities. In peace, you push them away easily. In war, when hurt and anger are strong, they stick longer. We all have these inner pictures. What matters is what happens next. Do we treat them as passing ghosts? Or do we turn them into plans? He let his hand drop. War laws, he said, are how our society tells every commander, every planner, these ideas, no matter how tempting, must stay in your head and go no further. They are a shield not just for our enemies, but for us. They keep us from becoming the kind of people who look at a city and see only targets, not children and homes. He glanced up toward the glass dome, where the blue of the sky was beginning to soften toward late afternoon. The mountains beyond were steady, indifferent to this talk of fear and rules. There is also a deeper, colder reason, he added. Predictability, that word, got attention from analysts across the hall. Predictability meant models. It meant risk that could be measured. When you ally with humans, Daniel said, you do not just get our ships and our guns. You get our minds under stress. If we have no clear limits, if every commander can do anything when afraid, then you cannot predict how we will act in a crisis. You cannot trust our promises about what we will not do. We become as dangerous to you as to any enemy, because panic and cleverness can take us anywhere. He spread his hand slightly. With strong enforced laws, he said, you get something else. You get a partner whose worst moves are tied down. You know that if a situation goes bad, there are things we are very unlikely to do, not because we are saints, but because we have tied our own hands in advance. That makes us safer to be near when things go wrong. A trade delegate from a neutral bloc leaned toward their console, eyes bright. You are saying, they asked, that your laws of war are not only ethical tools, but also signals. Even under stress. Yes, Daniel said simply, they are part of our operating manual. If you go into battle beside us, you deserve to know where our lines are. You deserve to know we will not suddenly decide that your civilians are acceptable collateral if a number sheet says so. He turned back toward Vrun. You prefer speed and fear, he said. I understand. But from our view, a partner who can do anything is more dangerous than a partner who will sometimes be slower because they refuse certain tools. We would rather stand next to someone whose limits we can trust than someone whose victories are fast but leave poison behind. Run's jaw clenched. His alliance had built its strength on that very reputation. Do not cross us. We will do whatever it takes. To hear that described as a liability, not a power, scraped against his pride, your fear of yourselves is not inspiring. Vroon growled. You come to us and say, we are dangerous, but we have tied ourselves up. Trust us. Daniel inclined his head slightly. I am not here to inspire you, he said. I am here to tell you the truth about what you are inviting in when you invite humans into your defense plans. We are creative. Under pressure, that creativity can turn dark. We learn that if we do not chain it, it will run wild. You can think that makes us weak if you like. We think it makes us honest. The moderator checked the time indicators. The planned slot for initial human remarks was nearly done. Lena touched Daniel's arm very lightly, a signal that the structure they had agreed on was nearing its end. Daniel looked back at her, then at the hall. I will end on this, he said. In your view, maybe rules are ornaments or tools of public image. In ours, they are survival systems. When we follow them, we are not saying, see how noble we are. We are saying, we are scared of what we might do if we let our fear and cleverness run free. We invite you to feel that same fear, not of us, but of yourselves, because the more powerful and connected this conquered becomes, the more damage any of us can do when we stop being afraid of our own ideas. He let those last words stand, then bowed his head slightly and stepped back from the ring. The chamber held a long, strange quiet. It was not the silence of boredom or dismissal anymore. It felt more like the air after a sudden, sharp sound, when ears still ring and thoughts are not yet settled. Some delegates looked down at their slates, pulling up human history files they had only skimmed before. Others exchanged low, tense comments. Sorrow's Well lifted their hand again, but this time there was no trace of humor on their face. Ambassador Whitaker, they said, as Lena took the speaking link back, if your laws are as central as you say, I assume they connect to your Reciprocity Clause. You would not ask us to carry a leash you refuse to wear yourselves. We will need to understand that connection very clearly. Lena met their gaze. You will, she said. That is the next part of our proposal. High Marshal Vroon's eyes were hard as stone. If you mean to bind my fleets with your fear, he said, you will find that a shorter leash can also be cut. That low thread sat between them all, heavy and plain. Outside the dome, the light on Lake Geneva shifted as the sun moved. Boats kept gliding. Wind touched the surface. The world beyond did not care about legal phrases or frightened minds. But inside, in the wide bowl of the summit hall, something had changed. The laughter that had met the phrase human conduct constraints in armed conflict did not return. In its place came a new kind of talk, more serious, more exact. Delegates asked for text, for definitions, for enforcement plans. Lena could feel it building like a slow turning of a ship, away from simple jokes about moral manuals, toward hard questions about how such locks might actually work across many stars. The Reciprocity Clause waited in her files, quiet and bright, ready to turn that shift into something real. The sun had slipped lower by the time the summit returned from its short recess. Light entered the glass dome at a different angle now, softer and more golden, sliding across the tiers and catching fine dust in the air. Outside, the mountains had gained long shadows, and Lake Geneva shone like a slowly turning sheet of metal. Inside, the mood had shifted. The easy smiles from the morning were mostly gone. Delegates sat straighter. Many of them had spent the break pulling human history and legal codes into their displays, comparing Daniel's words to old battles and public records. Some had found proof that humans had, in fact, tied themselves to war laws for generations. Others had found the scars from times when those laws had failed. The chamber did not feel particularly kind to humans now, but it did feel more serious. The moderator's signal tone sounded gentle but firm, calling everyone back to focus. "We will now turn," they said, "to the proposed Reciprocity Clause in the human submission. Ambassador Whitaker, you may present." Lena rose from her seat once more. Daniel stayed behind this time, watching, his hands folded loosely. As Lena walked down toward the speaking ring, she felt the weight of many eyes, not mocking now, but sharp and measuring. She stepped onto the stone, felt it warm to her touch, and called up the next document. Above the central ring, a simple text appeared in translation. Reciprocity Clause. Conditions for human participation in joint defense operations. Below it, a short line of summary text came into view, all in clear, plain language. Lena let everyone read the summary on their own first. It was only one sentence long, but that sentence carried more force than the thick stack of details underneath. "Ambassador," Scival said, breaking the silence, "your summary states that humans will only take part in joint defense operations under a framework where all signatories accept and follow the same core war laws. Is that a firm condition, or an opening position for talks?" "It is a firm condition," Lena answered. Her voice was even, but she felt her heart beat harder in her chest. "Earth and the human commonwealth will not enter a defense pact where we stand beside allies who can, in our name or under our shared flag, use methods we consider forbidden." From Vroon's block came a low, angry sound. His armor plates flexed, making a faint grinding noise. "You mean to force our hand," he said. "You say, take our rules or lose our ships. You dare this as the newest in this hall." Lena met his gaze. "We dare to be honest," she said. "Your fleets are strong, High Marshal. You do not need us to keep your space secure near term, but the Concord as a whole has asked for human patrols in certain regions, for our data nets, for our FTL relay support. You ask not only for our guns, but for our presence. This is the price of that presence." The moderator lifted a limb, slightly, Clarify for the record, they said. Does this clause mean that if a signatory refuses to adopt these shared war laws, humans will still trade, still speak, but will not share joint defense plans or ship deployments? Yes, Lena said, we are not cutting off the galaxy. We will still trade and talk, but our military cooperation will end where shared limits end. That plain line sent a small shock through the room. Some had expected humans to press their rules and then yield when real power pushed back. To tie their entire defense role to this was bolder than many had thought possible. Cyville's face had lost its earlier amusement. Their lights now moved in careful patterns of thought. Explain the structure, they said. If we accept your war laws, how will they be enforced? Who watches whom? Lena brought up the next layer of the document. The display above the ring shifted from a single line to a branching diagram. First, she said, we propose a shared code, a list of banned weapons and methods, protected persons and sites, and minimum standards of treatment. This list starts from our human conduct constraints in armed conflict and the strongest existing codes in this hall. It would be negotiated in detail with every signatory at the table. Lines glowed as she spoke. One list for bans, one for protections, one for duties. Second, she continued, we propose joint courts, Concord courts, with judges and staff drawn from many species, trained under a shared standard. These courts would have authority to investigate and try alleged war law violations by any signatory forces in joint operations. A small murmur rose. Courts were familiar. Courts that crossed borders and species were much less so. Third, she said, we propose shared monitoring. In any joint operation, units from all sides would carry standard recorders. Certain command decisions would be auto-logged to a protected Concord net. Independent observers would be present for major actions. This data would feed potential reviews. A delegate from a mid-tier defense alliance raised a limb. You ask us, they said, to let foreign monitors ride with our fleets. You ask us to let our internal command data go into a shared vault. That is a very large ask. It is, Lena agreed, but without shared facts, there can be no fair shared enforcement. We are not asking you to show all your secrets, only actions taken under the Concord flag, using shared force. She switched the display to a simple example. A joint patrol intercepts a suspected pirate base near a civilian station. Different forces respond, their actions recorded in parallel, visible to the Concord review system. You would not accept this? Lena asked gently, that when we fight together, your actions and ours are both held to the same visible standard. The delegate hesitated. We would accept review in principle. They said slowly, we fear espionage in practice. We can design secure splits. Lena said, data firewalls, redaction layers, time delays for release. Our engineers are ready to work with yours. But in the end, a choice remains. Do you want a defense pact where everyone can say, trust us, we did nothing too bad, or a pact where some shared eyes were truly watching? The question hung in the air, heavy and plain. Sa-Evel looked down at their own slate, then back up, eyes darker now. You call this safety infrastructure, they said, not moral decoration. Convince us. What makes this more than an Earth sermon written into law? Lena took a slow breath. Think of your space lanes, she said. You have beacons, traffic rules, auto-avoid systems. You do not install those because you doubt your pilots know how to fly. You install them because you know mistakes happen, storms hit, engines fail. The more traffic that flows, the greater the chance of crash without shared rules. She gestured lightly toward the whole hall. The Concord is traffic control for force, she said, as more species join. As more joint fleets fly, the risk of crash in war rises too. Not just ships colliding, but whole worlds colliding in fear and anger. Our war laws and this Reciprocity Clause are like beacons in dark combat space. They give all of us fixed points to steer by when confusion hits. A trade envoy from a cautious, neutral world spoke next. If we do not accept these laws, they asked, what, from your view, is the danger? We continue as we have. Some signatories have strong home codes. Some have few limits, especially far from home. Why must this change now? Daniel watched Lena's eyes for a moment. He could see how she remembered the faces of people on distant moons, the burned line of a supply convoy that had been hit through a loophole because the field is changing. Lena said, you all know this. Small ships now carry power that once took fleets. New weapons can scramble minds, not just hulls. Cyber tools can twist whole command nets in seconds. The more advanced our tools, the more damage a single bad decision can do. When that happens under a shared flag, the stain spreads. She changed the display again. This time it showed a simple timeline. Old Earth wars, early interstellar skirmishes, the recent incidents that had shaken trust between some species. In the last 20 years, she said, we have seen 3 cases where joint forces from different species were used for things their partners did not agree to. Bombardment of a refugee convoy by accident. A quiet nerve agent release in a rebel zone. A series of warning strikes that hit hospitals. In each case, someone later said, that was not our unit. That was them. Blame moved. Anger spread. The Concord's name burned in public feeds. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Not all of those cases had been fully exposed. Humans knew more than many had expected. In each case, Lena went on, there was no strong shared law to point to. No joint court, no clear record. So nothing real happened after. Perhaps a few commanders were moved quietly. Perhaps not. The message to the galaxy was, when the Concord acts, anything might happen, and no one will really answer. She let the last words land. That is a fragile kind of peace, she said. It looks calm until the day a world decides it cannot trust us and builds weapons in secret to fight us off. Sci-Fi studied her in silence for a few moments. If we accept your clause, they said slowly, we accept that our captains could be called before your courts. We accept that our past actions might be judged by standards we did not write. That is a deep shift. Your captains would be called before our courts and yours and everyone's, Lena said. These would be Concord courts, built together. As for the past, we propose that these laws apply, moving forward. We will not start this by digging decades back and putting ghosts on trial. We are trying to stop new harm, not refight old wars. There was a quiet, relieved exhale from many seats at that. Brune, however, still burned. Even if you say no retroactive trials, he growled, your clause still cuts into my freedom. If I sign, I promise not to use certain tools, not to strike certain targets, even when my worlds are at risk. If I do not sign, I lose your fleets and risk looking like a villain in this hall. This is coercion. Lena did not flinch from the word. It is choice, she said, but not a threat. We are not saying we will attack you if you refuse. For we are saying we will not stand beside you in war if you will not stand beside us under the same limits. We are saying, if you want our help pulling this load, you must agree not to cut the ground out from under our feet while we do it. The moderator watched the shifting markers, seeing how opinion maps changed in real time. Some blocks glowed with rising support. A calm voice came from a small delegation near the back, a quiet species that had seen more than they liked to remember. In our early alliances, their representatives said, we had no such laws. Our partners used terror when it pleased them. We won battles and lost our sense of who we were. We spent a century after that trying to fix what we had become. I hear in the human word something I recognize. I will not say yet that we accept every line, but I say this, I no longer think this is only about earth guilt. It feels like self-defense of the mind. Those last 5 words bent the room again. Self-defense of the mind. That is what Daniel meant, Lena said softly. Not just human minds, all minds that touch power without limit. We do not say you are children. We say you are dangerous, as we are. We say that if we do not all put some chains on our worst ideas, sooner or later those ideas will drag us all into something none of us can fully imagine. A long pause followed. The moderator consulted with their aides quietly, then addressed the hall. The time for debate on this article is nearly complete. They said, we will take 5 more interventions, then move to vote on whether to adopt the Reciprocity Clause as a binding part of the Concord Defense Framework. The next speakers came in a measured line. A mid-power alliance, war-tested, declared conditional support. They wanted longer phase-in times, training programs, and help rewriting their codes, but they agreed in principle that shared limits were better than silent chaos. A gas breather block asked for strict data protections and time delays on some recordings, but also favored joint courts, saying that, without them, their own reform efforts at home would fail. A trade coalition once relaxed about war as something that happened far away, now worried about brand and public trust. Their envoy said dryly, Our markets do not like the idea that buying from the Concord means buying blood. They backed the clause. Then Bruin spoke again. His voice beat around the chamber like a low drum. My alliance will not sign this. We have buried our dead without help from any of you. We have held our borders with our own claws and shells. I will not let a foreign court tell my captains how much fear they may use to keep our worlds alive. He swept a hand toward Lena and Daniel. You say you are afraid of yourselves, he said. Very well. Be afraid. Tie yourselves up with your rules. But do not bind us. If you will not fight as hard as we do not need you in our line. His words stung some, thrilled others, and made still others deeply uneasy. Sachez-vous asked for the final speaking slot before the vote. I cannot speak for all core world members, they said. But I can speak for my bloc. We find the human fear. We also find their honesty useful. We did grow complacent, far from war. We let our outlying forces improvise with too few checks. We have seen small scandals covered quickly. We do not wish to see a large one burn us. Their lights dimmed and brightened. We will support the Reciprocity Clause, Seville said. We will insist on careful drafting, strong privacy, and shared control of the courts. But we accept the basic idea that if we fight together, we must also limit ourselves together. And let someone watch. The hall reacted with a wave of color and movement. This was the signal many had waited for. If the Cache-Talon Core World Bloc could accept being watched and judged, others could too. The moderator's display updated, showing current projected votes. Support grew, resistance held solid, mostly around Run Block and a few close allies. We will now vote, the moderator said. Members will indicate yea, nay, or abstain on the question. Shall the Reciprocity Clause be adopted as a binding condition for human military participation in Concord defense operations, and as a shared framework for war conduct among signatories who so accept? Lights flickered as hands moved, tendrils tapped, eyes signaled. The main display filled with slowly shifting bands of color. Daniel watched the numbers rise, feeling strangely like he was back in a command center, watching enemy contacts blink on a screen, hoping for a pattern that did not end in fire. The final line settled. The moderator read it out. By a majority of 62% in favor, 21% opposed, and 17% abstaining, the Reciprocity Clause is adopted as part of the Interstellar Concord Defense Framework. Human military forces shall operate only under this framework. Signatories who decline to accept the clause shall not be eligible for joint operations with human forces. The sound that followed was not applause. This hall did not clap. It was a layered rustle of movement, hushed talk, a few sharp exhalations. Power had just shifted, not fully, not neatly, but clearly. Bruin stood very still. His armor seemed even heavier now. You have made your choice, he said coldly. So have I. He cut his block's joint operations tag with a command. The system recognized it, and a small marker appeared next to his alliance's name. non-participant in human Concord defense actions. He turned and left his stand, his aides falling in behind him like a dark tide. The chamber's doors slid aside and closed again with soft final motion. So Evel watched him go, then looked back at Lena and Daniel. When the session finally paused, when the formal language slowed, and the moderator declared a break before technical drafting, Saville signaled a private conversation request. Lena accepted. They met in a smaller side room, walls of smooth stone, one long window opening out toward the lake. Daniel came with Lena at Saville's own request. The case counselor stood near the glass, lights on their skin softer now. When you first spoke of war laws, Saville said, I thought of sermons. I thought of humans putting on a bright mask. After hearing you both, I think perhaps it is more like a brace for a broken limb. It is not there to impress. It is there to hold something that can heal, but might also never be fully steady. Daniel gave a small nod. That feels about right, he said. Sci-Fi turned their dark eyes toward him. Tell me truthfully, they said. Does it help? Do your minds feel safer with these locks? Daniel considered his answer. Yes, he said, not safe, but safer. It helps that when I wake at night and remember bad moments, I know there were lines we did not cross because we could not. It helps that I can tell young officers, you will not have to decide everything alone in the dark. Some choices are already taken away from you. Sci-Fi's lights shifted in a pattern that, in Kesh body language, meant unsettled respect. I do not like being watched, they said, plainly. No leader does. But I like even less the thought of my fleets acting with no one watching, not even ourselves. Perhaps we forgot that second danger. They looked out at the lake again. I have one more question, they said, not as a counselor, but as a mind who has not fought in a very long time. When you spoke of those passing thoughts, the dark ones that appear and go, I knew what you meant. Do your laws quiet those, or do they only cage them? Daniel walked closer to the window, standing beside them, looking out at the water touched by late light. They do not stop the thoughts, he said softly. Nothing does. But they stop us from pretending those thoughts are commands. They stop us from building our whole world around them. Over time, when a society knows certain paths are blocked, people walk them less even in imagination. The pictures come and they go, and they leave less of a mark. Sci-Fi watched small waves move against the shore, over stones that had been there for ages. I suppose, they said, that is as much peace as any of us can ask for from our own minds. Lena listened silently to this last exchange, feeling something inside her loosen. They had not won over everyone. Vroon's departing back still weighed on her thoughts. But Saville's questions and the way they now stood here, not mocking, not preaching, just trying to understand, felt like a small, solid gain. Later that night, long after the session, the dome dimmed to mimic the stars outside. Most delegates had retreated to their quarters or into secure rooms for quiet bargaining. The great hall, which had buzzed all day, now lay almost empty. By the shore, Under the open sky, Lena and Daniel walked along a simple stone path. The air was cool. The lake was dark now, holding the last traces of color near the far shore. Lights from the summit complex spilled in thin lines across the water, breaking and joining again with each small wave. So Daniel said, after a while, "We did it." Lena gave a small, tired laugh. "We did something," she said. "They passed the clause. Now we have years of dull work to build the courts, the monitors, the training, years of arguments about what counts as a civilian installation on a gas giant station, years of commanders trying to bend the rules as far as they can without breaking them. Which is the real work?" Daniel said. "Heaven tell, which is the real work," Lena agreed. They walked a few more steps in silence. "Do you feel any better?" he asked quietly. She thought about it. "Not because I believe every signatory will follow every rule. They will not because I think Vruin will stay away forever. He will not either, but because now, when things go wrong, there will be a place to bring the story. A shared place. It will not fix everything, but it will keep some truths from dying in dark rooms." Daniel nodded. Night insects, small and patient, sang somewhere in the reeds nearby. "My grandmother," Lena said after a moment, "once told me that for her, the first war laws were like a lullaby. Not because they were sweet, but because they made a promise. Even if war comes, there are some things they will not do to you." She said she could sleep a little easier with that thought, even when sirens wailed. Daniel listened, picturing an older woman in a smaller Geneva, long before glass domes and FTL ships, listening to far-off noises and trying to rest. "I used to think that was childish," Lena went on. "I thought real safety only came from hard power, from defense systems and good planning. Now I think the rules are part of that hard power. They're like a song we all agree to hum, very quietly, under the noise, so that when the shouting gets loud, there is still some steady pattern there to follow back to peace. A lullaby for whole worlds," Daniel said, "so that children on planets we will never see can sleep without knowing our names, but still be protected by what we did here." They stopped at a point where the path curved closest to the water. The lake lapped softly at the stones. Above, the sky was full of stars, some of them now linked by invisible lanes that ships passed along every day. "Do you think," Daniel asked, "that other species will start to fear their own imagination the way we do?" Lena thought of Seville's face, of the quiet delegate who had spoken of a century spent fixing what war had done to them, of the way some younger aides had looked shaken as they read accounts of old Earth's worst days. "I think some already do," she said. "They just did not have that fear turned into law yet. Now they have a path for that, if they want it." Daniel looked at his reflection in the dark water, a broken shape each time a small wave passed. "I am grateful," he said slowly, "that when the next young officer sits in a command chair, with a hard choice in a shaking hand, there will be rules on their screen and courts at their back. I hope they curse those rules in the moment and thank them later." Lena smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said, "in a few generations they will not even think about it. the lines will be so much a part of how they learn war that they will feel obvious. Of course we do not starve whole cities. Of course we do not poison sky. Of course we treat prisoners as people. Maybe the fear will be quieter then, like old pain that does not flare as often. They both stood there, letting the night wrap around them, the distant lights of strange ships blinking high above the mountains. Behind them, in the summit complex, teams were already at work. Legal experts started drafts, engineers drew up recorder specs, translators shaped careful language. It would be slow, it would be messy, there would be protests, exceptions, and failures. But a line had been drawn. Humans had stepped into the wide hall of stars and said, in front of everyone, "We are dangerous when we are clever and afraid. So we will bind ourselves. If you wish our strength, you must bind yourselves with us." Some had laughed, then stopped. Some had refused, at least for now. Many more had said yes, with shaking hands or steady ones. On the shore of an old lake, under a new glass dome, the first shared leash on galactic war imagination had been clipped into place. It was not a perfect lock. It was not unbreakable. Lena took a last look at the dark water and the line of lights along the summit. "Time to sleep," she said quietly. "Think you can?" Daniel asked. She listened to the gentle sound of the waves, to the deep, slow pulse of old earth under her feet, to the faint hum of systems in the dome that would keep watch through the night. "Yes," she said. "Not because everything is safe, just because there are a few more locks between us and the worst things we could do." Daniel nodded. "That is enough for tonight." They turned back toward the glass-lit path, walking side by side, their steps soft on the stone, leaving the lake to its dark, patient rest. Their steps soft on the stone, leaving the lake to its dark, patient rest. Their steps there. Their steps, their patient rest. And Mahdi and Movi and the stars above to shine down on a galaxy that, for all its dangers, had just chosen a little more restraint and a little more shared sleep. Over fear, without limits,